If you struggle with interview nerves, this video is for you. I'm going to teach you all of my tips and tricks on how to combat those interview nerves. Now, I was the worst nervous interviewer. Like, I'm talking freezing at answering questions. I'm talking about rambling, like just going off on all these tangents, type of answers to those interview questions. I'm talking shaking, sweating, throat dry, like all of the things. Now, I think why I am such a good coach at effectively dealing with interview nerves is because I went from that incredibly nervous interviewee to incredibly nervous, but also confident interviewee, where I was getting lots of compliments on my interviewing skills, where I was getting most offers from interviews or offers from most interviews. And it's because I have done it myself that allows me to help other people do it too. So the first thing I want you to do to combat your interview nerves is to welcome those interview nerves. I know it sounds weird, but what I learned was the more I resisted those nerves, the more I told myself I was silly or stupid for having the nerves, or that I shouldn't worry so much, or all of that stuff, it made me more nervous. And then when I was in the interview, I was thinking about, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me? Why can't I get rid of these interview nerves? Instead of being present in the interview, creating chemistry with the people who were interviewing me. Answering their questions in a storytelling way. So once I realized my nervousness was not going to go away, that kind of was like freeing. It's like Jenna Fisher talks on the Office podcast about how she wears, or the Office Ladies podcast, she wears a backpack every day. That backpack is her anxiety. And once she recognized that the backpack was just always going to be there, the load of the backpack became so much easier. So number one, just accept that it'll be there. It won't always be as like massive or heavy, but it will always be there a little bit. The second thing I want you to do is I actually want you to start practicing for an interview now. I don't care if you don't have an interview on the horizon. To me, I'm just a really big believer in foundational prep, in prepping ahead of the game. When we do it without that like stressor of an upcoming interview, it really allows us to focus on our stories and wrap our head around them, get comfortable with saying them, just gives us more time. So that when an interview pops up and those nerves sort of kind of kick up, we're not then from that state trying to come up with our best stories. All we're doing then is finalizing our prep and doing some company research. The second thing I want you to do, third thing I want you to do is I want you to prepare for the worst. So as a little bit of an Enneagram 6, I do love a little worst case scenarioing. It makes me feel very safe. But I think this works for anybody. So, for example, I prepared myself for rambling. I was so nervous about rambling. It was a big sort of thing that was in my way of being a confident interviewee, was being so incredibly in my head about do not ramble, do not ramble. And so instead, what I decided to do was to prepare myself for the inevitability that I would ramble, that it was going to happen. And I then thought, okay, what am I going to do when it happens? How am I going to notice when it's happening? What am I going to say? How am I going to bring it back? Because what I saw as an interviewer was people ramble all the time. Rambling is not like a you problem. It is a normal human being thing. And the people who were really good at it recognized that they were rambling and brought it back to the core story and finished the story. The people who were not good sort of rambled them way off into a sentence. It kind of quieted, and they would leave the story just hanging. They would not bring it back to the result. So I decided that for me, based off of my personality and my nervous energy, that I was just going to crack a joke about me rambling. And then I would just say, let me bring it back and let me continue my story. Sorry about the tangent I went off on. And that was really effective for me. It really kind of released the need to be perfect, released the need to not ramble, and just allowed me to show up as me and to go with the flow of the interview. So that when we are thinking about all of the ways that maybe it's freezing, maybe it's when you don't know the answer. I have a blog article for that. These are the things that we want to think about. What is the worst case scenario and how can I plan to support myself in an interview through them? The fourth key thing is you need to sleep well the night before. I don't know about you, but whenever I'm not sleeping very well, especially if it's anxiety related, it just makes me more nervous. It just makes the likelihood of my adrenaline to be pumping during those nervous times to be higher. So getting a good night's sleep, 7 to 9 hours is what most adults should get the night before an interview is key. My other secret thing that I would do is, again, that nervous energy. So I'm a leg shaker. My legs shake all night long, drives my husband crazy, but I just always have an undercurrent of energy. So when I am nervous, it gets worse. So what I learned to do was to go for a walk right before an interview. And ideally, you do this outside as well, because the outside is just, I don't understand the magic of outside, but it really helps ground and calms us. But getting some of that nervous energy out was really effective for me. I've had clients do yoga. I've had clients have a little dance party, whatever it is that releases a little bit of that energy and grounds you and calm you. Do that right before your interview. Another thing I loved to do was to put on a power song. I still do this for a lot of my podcast interviews that I do, or any big presentation. I put on a power song. And sometimes I'm doing it on my walk. Sometimes I'm also having a little dance party. Some of my favorite songs are like Titanium by Sia and David Guetta, Forever by Drake and Eminem, Can't Hold Us Down by Macklemore, anything that really pumps me up and has me like, I got this. I'm like on the top of the world. You can't bring me down. Like all of that, like good feelings. The seventh thing that I want you to think about is some food. It's like a little snack before. Now, here's why. I remember in my first year biology course in university, our professor telling us to eat a mini chocolate bar right before exams. She said that number one, when your adrenaline gets pumping and then you have a crash, you need a little bit of a pick-me-up. And then the combination of caffeine and sugar was a surefire way to get your recall, your sense of recall, to be quicker. So she didn't explain the science, and I did not do a deep dive into the science behind it. But who's going to say no to a little mini chocolate bar? But it doesn't have to be a chocolate bar. For example, I now have a banana I also have had orange juice. I have had many chocolate bars. I've tried out different things. And what I find is, for me, especially, I have some blood sugar issues, and definitely I crash halfway through interviews with that adrenaline if I don't have that little bit of food, that it really gives me the energy to like stay the course through an hour long or plus interview. So maybe again, you're on that walk right before an interview. You are listening to that power up song and you're eating a little bit of a snack. That like magic combination. Okay, the 8th tip I have for you is don't arrive too early. There is nothing worse than sitting in a waiting room on Zoom, in physical office, waiting for an interview. You're like thinking, okay, where do I put my jacket? How do I sit? How do I make it look like I'm not too nervous? And then you're like looking around and then you're starting to think about the interview and then it just gets worse and worse and worse. And you're like so nervous by the time it even starts. So 5 to 10 minutes, that is it. I don't want you arriving any earlier than that. Okay, last tip. The last tip for combating or dealing with your interview nerves is to fake it till you make it. This tip, like it just for me, took everything else and put a like nice little bow on it. And it is pretending your nervousness is just excitement. Now here's the science behind it. Our fear and nervousness, neuro pathways in our brain, the neurotransmitters, they are the exact same as our excitement one. And you can tell that because when you're really excited about something and you think about the physical sensations you're feeling in your body, they're pretty much the exact same as your nervous physical sensations. So if we're just like, oh, I'm not nervous, I'm excited, and we just keep telling ourselves that, or I'm nervous and excited. Doesn't always have to be or, it can be and. When we start telling ourselves that, then we enter into the interview excited for the interview. Still a little bit nervous, but a lot more excited. And this is how, over the years, I got less nervous and more excited for my interviews. Now, probably I was just as nervous, but I got so used to telling myself, oh, I'm just excited, that eventually it sort of just came true. Now, I'm curious, what tip for combating interview nerves are you going to use before your next interview? Or how are you going to use all of them? Let me know in the comments below. And if interviews are that sticking point, they're keeping you stuck, or you're not getting any offers despite the fact that you're getting interviews, then I want you to join the Career You Love Academy, because we do mock interviews, including one next Tuesday, where we workshop the answers to the questions you are most afraid of, so that we deal with the nerves that specific question is bringing up for you. To join, click the link below or message me and I'll send it to you. It's a 7-day free trial, so it's kind of a no-brainer, so that you can say goodbye to this job search that sucks, this job that doesn't appreciate you as much as you want it to, and find a job you really want, a career you love. Until next week, happy job searching.
If you liked this video, then I invite you to join me in the Find Your Dream Job program, where you work less, make more money, and finally feel fulfilled doing work that you love. Find out more at www.sarahcurto.ca/CYLA. See you there.